Hi, good morning everyone. Let's get started with the next topic in this training, which is on users in SAP ABAP system. So in this topic we'll talk about the creation of users, copying, creation and maintenance of roles, assignment of roles, system logon. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so basically here you can see these are the three layers in which the user creation happens in SAP environment. You can see the front end layer where it's SAP GUI. They are basically the SAP users, and we have the operating system users. Okay, then you have the from SAP GUI you are connecting to the dispatcher where you have uh, work processes. Basically you have the dispatcher, you have background jobs, you have updates, logs. So these are the things which is there. Then at the bottom you can see there is a database server where you have the database users. So these are the three layers of users that we come across in SAP environment. Okay, in the next slide what you are seeing is about the users in SAP environment, that is how the authentication checks happens there. So basically authorization protection is performed here in two levels. One is a transaction, basically whether you can call it transaction or not, that is the first check. Second check is authorization for actions and data that are used during a transaction. That is, you can execute a transaction, but what actions you can perform, like for example you can display a particular user, you can edit a particular user, you can delete a particular user. So these are the actions that can be performed even though you can go to SU01, but what actions you can perform, that is defined by the another layer of authorization protection. Okay, then third thing that is about user authorizations are assigned using roles. So the roles are basically you can club all your uh, authentication in a role and they are entered in the user master record. Okay, if you see this slide here, it's showing that user actions. Okay, you have authorization H, A, B, then role E, role A. So this is there in your this user's master record. Then this user's master record had these uh, authorizations and these roles. So basically the authorization checks whether the transaction is permitted, whether authorizations are assigned. So this is basically, there is some examples given showing that about the user master record, lock entries, etc. Okay, the next thing is about the types of users. So basically it's pretty important from for a basis perspective, what are the different types of users, like a dialog user. So dialog user is the most common and most key user, which is basically used by one and everyone who logs into SAP system. During a dialog logon, the system checks for your expired passwords, initial passwords, and the user has opportunity to change his own password. So multiple dialog logons are checked and logged. Basically there is a T code, there is a table called USR 41 underscore MLD table where you can see, we can define whether the multiple logons are possible or not. So that is about the dialog user. Let's see the next user. In this case is a system user. So system user is basically, it's a dialog free communication within a system or for background processing within a system, or also for RFC users for various applications like ALE, workflow, transaction, transport management system, central user administration. So these are the different uh, tasks, or these are the different activities in which system user is used. Okay, one key thing to note here is that you cannot log in using SAP GUI to a system user, so just take note of it. And users of system type are basically for is exempted from the validity period of password. Okay, then communication data, that is another type of user. Basically this is also dialog free user for communication between systems. Okay, then is in separate next user is a service user or a reference user. Service user is basically a type of service or the dialog user that is available to a larger anonymous group of users. You should only assign highly restricted authorization to users of this type. Service users, like for example for administering the ICF service, system doesn't check for the expired or initial password during logon for this type of user. Okay, then let's get into the reference user. Reference user is like a general user, not a specific to a particular person. You cannot use a reference user to log on. Reference user is used just for assigning additional authorization. You can specify a reference user for a dialog user for additional authorization on the roles tab. Okay, so that is about the different types of users and whether the password change is required for them to start with or not. Okay, so basically you go to the transaction called SU01 to create and define all these user types. Okay, so let me go to the SU01 transaction. Here you can see I am in the SU01 transaction. So let's say I want to create this user. I click on create and it will give me this particular interface which says or ask about the mandatory fields. So last name is one of the mandatory field. If you go to the logon data, here you can see the type of users that we just described. So dialog user, system, communication data, reference, service. Okay, so these are the different types of user we can create. And here you can see that I can define the initial password for the users. Okay, so this will be the initial password for the users. Okay, so that is about the user. If I just save it, this user will get created. Okay, this user is created. Now if I can go to the edit tab to make changes for this users. Okay, so that is about the user creation. And under logon, here you can see there is a field called user group. Okay, you can select a user group over here. Basically you can define different user groups. So by default there is one user group called super, which is already there. Okay, this is basically used when you want to group the users. Okay, so that is about the user creation. And for maintaining the user group there is a transaction called SUGR. Okay, so let's see how that transaction looks like. So if you type SUGR, it will give a field that can, using that you can create your transaction, maintain your user groups. Okay, we can define, say for example I want to create a user group called test2. I'll just click on create and this particular user this particular group is created, and I will just put this user called test2 that we have created into this. Okay, so here you can see that this is created, and if I go to SU01 again and let's look for this user, go to the display mode. Here this is the display mode. Okay, so display mode, this is the user that we created, and on this tab here, okay, click on edit. It's basically locked. Okay, locked means that someone is already in that user edit box. Okay, so this is where I was in, so just come out of this. Okay, so and then we can go to the edit mode for this user. Okay, when we go to the edit mode, we can see this is a group that we just created. Okay, as we were in the we were locking this user, so the group was not assigned to it. Okay, now you can see this particular the group is assigned to this. Now if I want, I can delete this user using this tab. Okay, so this user will get deleted. And if I go to SU0 SUGR again and search for, okay, so let's go to SUGR tab and say I delete this particular user group, which is test2. Okay, it's asking for validation. Yes, I want to delete it. Okay, so this particular group has been deleted. Okay, so that is about the user groups that we just saw. Okay, so user groups are used to distribute user maintenance among several administrators. Okay, we have seen how to create a user group, how to create users. Okay, so let's get into the next topic, which is about the authorization object and authorization checks. Okay, so basically in this topic we'll talk about the different authorization objects and how you can use them and how you can set the properties for them, and basically about the authentication model we'll be talking about. Okay, so to understand the ABAP authorization concept, basically you should have a little bit knowledge about the roles. We just saw about the user creation. Roles is basically we club all the privileges, all the authorization into roles. So we'll be covering as well in this particular section. Okay, so here in this particular slide we are talking about the authorization object. It's one object only we are covering here, which is S_USR_GR. So this basic object basically stores the master record information. So it's the user group is stored here. Okay, so here you can see the object class. Basically it is for grouping or sorting authorization object. So we have the object class. Then we will see the authorization object. In this particular case it's S_USR_GRP. Okay, for that object we'll see two things. One is first authorization is that is the activity, and we'll see about two things here, activity and user group and user master record. So authorization, basically first thing is about create, change, display, and another authorization that will create is just a display. Okay, so you can get a feel of how this authorization works. Okay, so let's log in into the system as well to show you how we can change them, how we can see the different authorization groups. Okay, so let's see the different authorizations. So basically the transaction for the roles is PFCG. Okay, in PFCG let's create it a role called test role, and we'll create a single role. Here you can see the different roles concept. Okay, and if I go to menu, I'll just save this one. Okay, here we can add the transactions straight away. So that is one way of adding it. Second way of adding it that we are just explaining. Okay, we can go to the authorization tab and just click on the profile. Okay, the profile is created. Now I'll go to change authorization data. So we are saving this role first. Okay, so this role is getting saved. Now it's giving a template. I can select template to make this happen, or I can just go here and add the objects manually. So this way I can just add the object. Say for example, I just want to add this object. Okay, so I have added this one particular object. Okay, we can use a filter as well to group them. So here basically this is a search. We are trying to do a search here. Okay, so we are interested in something which is starting with S. Here you can see this is S. So the authorization that we are talking about is S underscore user underscore GRP. So if I just expand this, here you can see there is no activity is associated with it. So I just need to click on edit, and these are the different activities which can be assigned, and I have the option to select full authorization for this particular object, or I can just do a display authorization. So depending on what is my requirement, I'll select. Okay, so this is selected user group in. Okay, I can assign this to a particular user group as well. Okay, then or if I just want everything in this, just save it and I will just execute this. So this way basically we are giving an access to an authorization object, and this role that I have created here, this is the test role I can assign to a user. So that way we are controlling the authorizations. Okay, so that is about the authorization object. We have seen the, okay, if I just click on the test tab, under the authorization we see display authorization data, and we have seen the things like this is the activity, this is the user group and user master record. Okay, so let's go to the next slide in this tutorial, which is talking about how the check happens. Okay, so this is basically showing the flow of activities in the check. Okay, that's all I wanted to cover in this particular topic. Thanks for joining.